Demographics is one of those big six which ultimately drive real estate. The six, of course, the big six: population growth, employment, infrastructure, demographics, supply and demand, and yield variation. The big six of real estate. Welcome to the Urban Property Investor. I'm your host, Sam Saggers, here to help you crack the code of real estate wealth. Today's show, we're going to dig into some lessons around demographics. I recently got to spend some time with the co-founder of the demographics group, Simon Kushtermaker, which is the hardest name in real estate to pronounce. But Simon Kushtermaker is an absolute genius when it comes to future pacing what the data reveals when it comes to where is Australia headed when it comes to understanding people. Yes, demographics is really the study of people and place, and Simon is one of the world's best at it. So I feel very privileged to have spent some time learning from the best. So ultimately, I want to pass on some of the lessons Simon revealed around where Australia is headed and how that pertains, I love that word, pertains to property investment. So that's where we're at, folks, and let's get into today's show. But of course, we can't start a Urban Property Investor program without saying the little line: make sure you play the show in double speed, get your life back. And if it's your first time tuning into the program, wow, you've struck real estate gold. Make sure you go back in time though, because there's a lot of episodes that are ultimately lessons on real estate. I try to make the programs as much about learning about real estate as possible. And yes, often I dress like a gopnik, which I am today with the Adidas tracksuit on. Who doesn't like wearing a gopnik Adidas tracksuit? You haven't lived until you've strutted your neighborhood in Adidas. So is it Adidas or Adidas? I don't know. Maybe we should ask Simon Kushtermaker from Germany as to how to pronounce the gopnik outfit of Adidas. But hey, let's do it. Let's crack on to today's show and some of the revelations from one of the world's best demographers. And I think lessons about demographics ultimately will reveal what's going to happen in real estate. Demographics is one of those big six which ultimately drive real estate. The six, of course, the big six: population growth, employment, infrastructure, demographics, supply and demand, and yield variation. The big six of real estate. Demographics, though, is a bit of a momentum driver when it comes to how real estate works. And if we can spot the little momentum concepts, we can have a little bit more long-term faith in real estate. And really, spending time with Simon revealed we should absolutely have faith in the asset class of real estate. So I'll give you some of his insights into what next, what we need to understand about Australia and really the asset class of real estate. I guess the first revelation that was imparted upon me is Australia is really part of the Asia Pacific Rim. And it's very important to understand your neighbors. Our neighbors are ultimately an urban Asian middle class continuing to expand. And whilst we have very, very few cities of scale here in Australia, whereby we've only really got 5 cities with over 1 million people, our neighbors, which ultimately include a large Indonesia, a large Malaysia, large India, a large China, a large Japan, are big places. And there are basically cities growing past the 1 million person population base, and into the future will continue to become even bigger off the back of an expanding middle class. Now, what does this mean for Australia? Well, of course, Australia is one of the Anglo countries in that hemisphere or that sphere of influence. And of course, for a lot of the wealthy Asian marketplaces, they want to learn from the Australian education system. So we know population-wise, we've got a hungry set of neighbours who ultimately want to use our universities, who want to be part of a reverse learning system by coming to Australia. So we've got a absolute gold mine, a once in a lifetime gold mine unfolding through the Asian middle class expansion. And of course, that means they will need our raw materials. That means they will use our universities. That means they will even expand using things like our iron ore. So we're blessed to be living in a period of basically Asian middle class expansion, which is ultimately helpful to the overall demographics of Australia. Australia will continue to become a wealthier place from that paradigm. But we are an aging population, and really when it comes to the concept of an aging population, we are seeing extremes unfold off the back of what that looks like. Now, Australia's population by age will reveal certain concepts in real estate. And the beautiful thing about Australia's population by age is we are getting older, but right now equally the center of the age group, if you like, is in a millennial period. We are living in the time of a millennials, but with an aging population. Now, what we can learn from having an aging population where we are literally going through a period of a lot of people entering retirement age. So if we were to look at the relative change in Australia's population between now and 2034, there is a massive amount of people entering retirement living and also aged care. Now, this in itself is a signal, according to Mr. Simon Schustermaker, that we have to continue to import people because we are just simply not having enough babies to pay for Australia's aging population base. Locally, we're not getting jiggy with it anymore. And so 2 out of 3 people that Australia's grows by come from overseas. 1 out of 3 is born locally. So to mirror paying for an aging population, we're having to ask people to come to our country to live and basically populate our country. Now, the argument is, and of course in the political theatre at the moment, there is a lot of conversation around stopping immigration, slowing down immigration, and really the counter argument to that is it would be foolish to do because you've got such an aging population which is unfolding that you need more taxpayers at the bottom of the funnel to pay for the older people at the top of the funnel who are ultimately in a period of their life where there's a huge cohort that all of a sudden needs looking after. Now, I'm witnessing this in my own life. Some of my friends' parents are old and fragile. And they have not comprehended any of this, and it's come out of left field for them that all of a sudden they're going into a phase of their life where they're having to care for their older parents through all sorts of means. And one friend of mine, his parent isn't wealthy, has ultimately no money, and now for my friend, he's the one paying the bill for his parent to ultimately live. And so there's a good reminder here that we are often connected to our families, and though we are, probably people listening to me are maybe having kids or have kids, there's a reverse situation unfolding in society where a lot of older people do not have the financial capacity to enter retirement, and the burden of that economically is being passed down to basically people who have the economics to pay for their parents as well as their children to ultimately live. And so I tried to position that as delicately as I could, but it basically what's happening is old people are retiring with very little money, and when their health starts to decline, they don't have the money to pay to actually stay alive. And that in itself is unfolding right now. So if that isn't a message of get your shit together so you can economically help other people, economically help yourself, it should be, because here in Australia, we've got a big tsunami of old people basically going to need help. And off the back of that, we just don't have enough healthcare workers, and we don't have enough people staying in the healthcare space. Wages are pretty low inside of healthcare. Nurses struggle to make ends meet, to pay for an apartment to live in. You've got basically a underclass happening in healthcare and a tsunami of old people which is entering the marketplace. So what does all that mean? Well, it means we need to go overseas and import people into the country of skill, including healthcare, to prop up, obviously, an aging marketplace. And if we don't do that, we will suffer the consequences of a unbalanced society, and you start to really see economic decline off the back of that. So despite the rhetoric of many politicians asking for a slowdown in population growth, Simon believes that's not going to be the case, because the maths doesn't math, if that makes sense. You've got too many old people, and you need young people to pay for the old people through taxes, when taxes help the healthcare system and ultimately pay for the nurses. So that's a long way of getting that one out. But it does lead to the question, does Australia have a skills gap shortage? And ultimately, it does appear that Australia has gaps in many pockets of our society. We just simply don't have enough basically aged care workers or disabled carers or nurses, along with many other things that are basically in decline. Now, you could go to, for example, the truck driver space. Here in Australia, people don't leave school and basically go, for the next 45 years of my life, I want to drive a truck. That is in decline. And so because of obviously Australia's big landscape, to move stuff around, you need freight through truck drivers and rail train drivers. And so because no one wants to be a truck driver, there's a shortage of truck drivers. So will Australia need truck drivers coming in from overseas, basically as part of a population growth strategy? It will. It absolutely will. And it's just these little signals which ultimately tell us that Australia can't change its population strategy. It has to go for the big Australia because the population mix is not right at the moment. There's ultimately not enough of certain worker types to fill the jobs, to move Australia, to grow Australia. And that in itself is one of the biggest skills gaps going around. There's certainly other skills gaps that are basically in society. And one of them, of course, is that Australia is really growing its profile to be what is known as a knowledge economy. It has a lot of knowledge workers in its economy. Now, if you go back to 1987, 23% of workers were knowledge-based workers. That has basically improved by circa 50% to today. 35% of workers in the economy are now knowledge-based workers. They could be scientists, they could be university educated, knowledge-based workers in the financial sector. So what's happened is we have an abundance of knowledge workers who today dominate the marketplace. We don't have enough truck drivers. And then if you look at, say, that middle tiered marketplace of workers, in 1987, 20% of them were, your tradies. Today, that's dropped down to 13%. 13% of society today are tradies, 20% back in 1987. So we've gained on intellectual, basically knowledge-based workers that can be digital, that can work from anywhere, that basically meet people on Zooms. And we've lowered the amount of basically builders in this country. And if you want to understand why property values are so expensive, and I might come back and talk about this, ultimately we don't have a supply issue, we have a cost of supply issue because we do not have in this country enough people who have the knowledge to build stuff. And so you get this monopoly-based effect of basically only a few amount of companies being able to build anything. And I think we've all witnessed the basically CMFEU and the government going at it, because the CMFEU is a very, very powerful trade union that can monopolize the amount of jobs that they get in, because there is no competition, because there is not enough actual workers in the economy. And they will say that they have done a great job to lift wages for that midsection of society, that middle wage cohort, that mid level job sector, if you like, which is the tradie. But ultimately, a lot of that has been also why there's been good wage pressure on tradies, is there's just not enough of them. There's not enough skill going around in that space. Now, the other big differential which is unfolding as we transform the what people do is really the tenant base is growing in Australia. If you were to understand the workforce by skill, basically you've got low level skill, which is skill level 5. You've got low level skill, which is skill level 4. Level 5 is kind of your cleaners. They don't have any education qualifications. They're quite often part-time workers. Level 4 is pretty close to that. The worker doesn't have any skill. And then level 3 is your tradies. Level 2 and 1 is more your high level, high paying jobs. Level 1 jobs can be, $180,000 a year. So your knowledge-based economy jobs, level 2 and 1, dominate Australia. Back in 1987, that obviously wasn't the case because only 23% of jobs in level 1 were knowledge-based jobs in the financial sector, in the science sector. And if you go back to 1987, we had a very big cross-section and a big middle class in Australia. Today, though, we don't have a bigger middle class anymore, and we've kind of got, if you like, wealthier jobs that pay more and jobs which can't keep up with the cost of living. And today, 40% of basically the marketplace, the jobs market, probably have jobs that can't afford to buy real estate. They will never be able to afford to buy real estate. And so for property investors, it's probably fair to say we are now entering, as we go into the next decade, a period where the rental market will continue to grow and a lot of tenants will never actually ever own real estate. They will never buy their family home. And that's just the sad truth of how Australia is growing. We are growing at extremes. The middle class has kind of disappeared. And I was talking to someone about this the other day. It's kind of like you don't hear as much tall poppy syndrome as you once did, because tall poppy syndrome in Australia was a big thing. We used to bring people down that were getting ahead. But ultimately, a large proportion of Australia is getting ahead and they're not bringing each other down. There is no middle anymore. There's just poor people and people on the other side of that divide working out how to become wealthy. If you look at the level 4 and 5 workers, it's 40%. If you look at the level 2 and 1 workers, which make the most money, it's 46%. If you look at the middle, it's 13%. There is no middle anymore. So interesting way to analyze the world. Rich people are going to fight over assets and it will cost more. There is no builders to build the assets, which mean real estate will cost more. And poor people will become the tenants for the rich people, and the middle class that build stuff won't be able to get to every job. And so the middle worker, which is that middle tradie, will be in high demand in the future. Absolute high demand in the future. And, we were talking about really the cost to repair things is just going to continue to go up. And I see this all the time. Like sometimes, a landlord will question a bill that is a really simple repair. Oh, why did it cost $250 to fix a bolt in a door? Why is there's no one here to do the job? That is why. And you get this price gouging effect of buying people's time. if we look into the future, there's just not going to be enough handymen to go around because today no one wants to be a handyman. There's not going to be people coming out of school going, I want to be a handyman. And so I say this to mothers with children, put a little hammer in the cot, put a little, saw in the cot and grow the child of tomorrow to actually even not be a knowledge worker, but be the most shortage of worker, which is that tradie. The tradie of tomorrow will do very, very well. And Simon kind of explained it that we need to consider longevity assets because it's going to cost a lot to repair stuff down tomorrow into the future. Now, if you've bought a much older property and your idea down the track is to fix it up and you've thought, oh, well, it's only going to cost 70 grand. Well, maybe in 10 years, it's going to cost 200 grand because of the shortage of skill in the marketplace. The skill is a bit of a problem. Now, I've known this for a long time and I tend to stick around longevity assets, a little bit more modern where you don't need to worry or factor in future capital costs into your investment strategy for your retirement. So big skills gap, big problem with longevity assets. If you don't have the right asset, you're going to face the skills shortage head on. Your asset is going to meet skills shortage. But equally, what is very, very interesting in Australia is a growing rental cohort of people simply unable to enter the real estate market because it is expensive. Equally, we sit on the basically world's rise of wealth through the middle class, and Australia as well is growing older, which is putting pressure on certain skills to be imported into the country. But what is also fascinating is the current, bigger demographic eras whereby we've got Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, baby boomer. What are these groups going through at the moment? And it's fair to say that COVID kind of hit when one of the biggest cohorts in Australia was going through a transformation, the cohort or the group known as the Millennials. Millennials are basically anywhere from sort of 35 to 48 years of age. And they are ultimately today entering the family formation stage. And because they're entering the family formation stage, they are buying houses whereby they've got 3 and 4 bedrooms. And so if we look at the naming convention for people that often enter the market for the first time, they are called first home buyers. And the first home buyer market is a massive, massive marketplace at the moment. And of course, for a lot of millennials, they're choosing first homes to buy in all sorts of places, but you are seeing a lot of people choose to buy first home in new land corridors. And so you're seeing a correlation of capital growth in new land corridors where people are buying their first home to start out with. Now, the reason a lot of millennials are buying first home on the urban fringe in new land corridors and in lifestyle marketplaces a little bit further afield is a lot of millennials are knowledge workers. Remember, they are that cohort, 35% of them today, people in society are knowledge workers. So Australia has kind of settlement patterns, and pre-COVID, really the concept was to live as close to the CBD as possible because of basically broken transport and road networks, which made it very hostile for a knowledge worker to come and go from the city. As we know, knowledge workers now also work in the city, but can spend a little bit more time working from anywhere. And so I mentioned this in a previous podcast. There is really the concept of a settlement pattern of people wanting to be basically anywhere up to 125 kilometers from the CBD, but typically within 2 hours of the CBD. You're getting the millennial first homeowner market go to these areas. So that could be actually living in the Central Coast and going to Sydney. It could be even living as far as Newcastle, but also connecting to Sydney. It could be living in Toowoomba and going to Brisbane. It could be the Gold Coast to Brisbane, Sunshine Coast to Brisbane, Geelong to Melbourne. You're getting these, obviously, post-COVID scrambled egg effect of where people actually live. And what it is millennials having children, needing family homes, but they can't afford the family homes in the middle ring of our cities. Why can't they? Because their parents still own that area. Their parents own the homes in the middle ring. Their parents are now 60, 65, 70 and dominate the wealth in those precincts. And so it's very hard for a millennial to buy a $5 million home 7 kilometers from the CBD of Sydney. It's impossible unless there is that element of intergenerational wealth transformation, unless their baby boomer parents are basically paying a proportion of their baby boomer wealth into the millennial wealth. So what we're seeing is a large amount, millions of basically people looking to live within a 2-hour radius of a capital city and choosing the lifestyle precincts as best as they can find them further afield. And so this settlement pattern is a massive driver for the next decade. And I say this to my clients, like if we can find those lifestyle areas that basically are affordable yet highly livable, that are within that 2-hour precinct of the major capital, over the next 10 years, the market demand is going to drive capital growth for those areas. Why? Because there's extra people wanting to constantly do that behavior, that pattern. That pattern is in high demand. And it's all to do with demographics. It's all to do with the millennials being unable to buy what their parents have currently control and go further afield. Now, obviously, we know that the outer suburbs are going to provide a solution for that cohort, but equally, we are also seeing that the downsizer market is a bit fiddly. The downsizer market is ultimately people who should actually evacuate their house because they don't need that space. You've got basically 65-year-olds, 70-year-olds living in 6-bedroom homes 10 kilometers from the city, just husband and wife. They don't need the extra 4 bedrooms in their 6-bedroom house. But what we also know is here in Australia, people don't downsize as readily as you think they do. We are seeing elements of it, but and what is really unfolding here in Australia is a lot of baby boomer wealth is being transferred into legacy assets. So we're seeing, for example, big sales happening in Brisbane and the Gold Coast in trophy locations, you're seeing $4, $5, $6 million sales of baby boomer money going into the best assets in those marketplaces, and that has an upward effect of what properties are worth in some of those lifestyle trophy marketplaces. And I've talked about that on a recent podcast. If you actually look at where there is a high level of price growth, a lot of it is around where the suburbs are attracting trophy money coming into the marketplace. So we know that eventually the baby boomer will start to pass away. And the forecast is that in 2030s to 2040s, we're going to also be dealing with a lot of the big cohort of the baby boomers starting to pass away. Now, they live in the middle suburbs of Australia. Those suburbs, say 10 to 25 kilometers from the city. And ultimately, that will put pressure on the 2030s or mid-30s to 2040s market, which will be one of the craziest real estate markets we've ever seen in Australia. Why? Well, according to Simon, you're going to see the densification of Australia's middle suburbs in that period. We're going to see rezonings happening. We're going to see a block of land, which is 700 square meters, turned into 12 townhomes. We're going to see the millennials that live in the outer suburbs look at those townhomes, those luxury townhomes, and go, wow, let's go and live closer to the lifestyle precincts, the better suburbs, the more efficient suburbs. Let's now buy out the baby boomer marketplace. So effectively what is going to unfold is the millennials will go to the outer suburbs for their capital growth. They will then bring their capital growth back into the middle suburbs when their baby boomer parents start to basically pass away. And we know that their baby boomer parents are also pretty rich if they own real estate in those middle suburbs because of the sheer nature of prices in those middle suburbs. And that's where we're going to get this intergenerational wealth effect. And that wealth effect will reach its crescendo basically in 2041. Why do we know that? Well, the average age of someone passing away is 84 years of age, and we reach that peak in 2041, whereby the mother of the household reaches 84 years of age. The father has already passed away, and then all of a sudden that wealth that the mother has is redistributed to her children. And of course, when you create a massive injection of structural money coming into the marketplace of huge amounts of money, billions and billions of dollars being passed on to a younger generation, you're obviously going to see a wild amount of spending unfold. Now, by way of example, in COVID, the federal government spent literally $1 trillion basically injecting money into the market. We saw huge amounts of inflation off the back of that. Property values in some markets doubled during that period of time. You can fast forward to basically a period starting around 2035 and ending around 2048, and you will see around $6 trillion worth of money change hands intergenerationally. Basically, older people, who've built wealth, passing it on to their kids. Now, obviously, you are seeing some smart families work out how to extract that money now and share it amongst their family dynasty. But for the most part here in Australia, oldies take everything to the grave, and you will see that money change hands. Now, arguably, the government knows this, and may start to even impose some death taxes on that money. Watch that space. So a lot of smart families are working out how to beat what that could look like down the track, because there's just a bucket load of money about to enter changing hands. And it's not far away. When you think about it, it's 2024 now. By 2014, one cycle away, we're going to see a massive structural shift in real estate, probably the biggest shift in real estate we've ever seen, because of basically freeing up the middle suburbs, which are usually the best suburbs. Let's face it, something 10, 12, 13 kilometers from a major city is usually a pretty nice place. It's got efficient schools. It's got great shops. It's usually pretty. It's got lifestyle benefits. It's got great parks. It's close to amenities. It's close to the city. It's close to beaches. And that's all going to be freed up. And because of rezoning, because we don't have enough tradies, rebuilding those middle suburbs are going to be, again, seen as potentially even aspirational. And even though you won't have 700 square meters of land, you might have 280 square meters of land, you're going to have a very beautiful dwelling on that land, and 5 neighbors, but that will transform what our middle suburbs look like. And so very interesting sector of space. The future looks amazing. And again, one thing we just need to be very, very mindful of is 84 years of age is the number here in Australia. 50% of people living and listening to this call right now will make it to that point, and 50% will make it past that point. 50% won't, unfortunately, get there, or will just, basically make that age limit. Now, I say that because for the 50% of people that pass 84 years of age, there's got to be a money set aside for your healthcare. I'm seeing this firsthand right now, where some older generations just don't have enough money to care for themselves. They can't even, they are now passing the burden on to their kids to care for them. And which, obviously is one way to play the game, have some kids and hope they look after you. But the burden they are now putting on their kids who aren't economically rich is huge. And so why do we need to invest in real estate? As simple as it sounds, we live in a capitalist country and we need capital to create us a return on our life. That's it. It's the only reason property is an important asset class. It's shelter and it's a return on life. So plan your life well. There's some insights from the greatest demographer that's maybe ever lived. So there's some thoughts to take away. I'll leave that with you. I'll talk again soon when we do another podcast. All right, folks, over and out. Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Property Investor. To never miss an episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app or on YouTube. And I would love it if you could give the show a rating and share it with your friends and family. In between episodes, you can always keep in touch with me by connecting on social media over Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Until we meet again on the next episode of the Urban Property Investor, take care and bye for now.